Oddity is a 2024 movie about the twin sister of a woman that's killed a year earlier looks for more answers. Now, for obvious reasons, I never look at reviews or articles about a given film before I see it or review it, but this movie kind of came across my radar because I happened to catch a headline saying that this might be one of the best movies of 2024. Well, that's good enough for me. That's all I needed to hear. So I went in not knowing really anything else about it. And when I came out, I thought that article was just way off. However, what surprised me the most is seeing more and more articles that kept coming out praising this movie to the ends of the earth. I don't think I've seen anybody say anything bad about this movie up to this point. So maybe I'm wrong and I just missed a bunch of the good stuff, or maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know, but I'm really surprised at how many people mention this movie at the top of their lists for best of the year. I mean, I'm all for championing low-budget films in the theater. The more low-budget that can get some notoriety, the better. But I really found this movie kind of flat and just ineffective. I had a lot of issues with this film. But I think my biggest problem was with the script itself. I thought the dialogue switched between either boring or just frustrating. Now, to be fair, the story is a solid idea. A woman is killed while fixing up her home, and her sister has an idea about why. And so, using her knowledge of curses, witchcraft, and dark magic, she tries to get to the bottom of it and find that her sister's death is more than what it seems to be. Now, that sounds great. But I just thought it's never able to really build upon its premise in a way that added any tension. Instead, I found it to sort of rely on this giant creepy puppet to sell almost all of its atmosphere. I thought this movie would have been a great short film, or maybe even like a long episode of television, like a Tales from the Crypt or something, but it just didn't have enough to warrant a 98-minute movie. Basically, I just felt like it had too much meandering. Now that said, the movie starts off really well. Danny and her husband Ted had bought this very odd house in the middle of nowhere, more on that later. And while Ted is working as a doctor in the overnight shift at a mental hospital, Danny is at the house fixing it up. Now the house doesn't have any lights or anything, and so she's just camping out in the living room with a lantern. First off, there is no way I would ever do that. That sounds like complete nightmare fuel. So I give her props for doing that. Anyway, she hears a noise outside, goes to investigate, and when she comes back inside, someone comes to the door and tells her that when she wasn't looking, someone had snuck inside and she needs to get out. It's a really good scene that's able to play in a way where you feel what she's kind of going through. At first, you think, don't you dare open that door. But then the more that he talks, the more he gets convincing on what he says he saw. It's such a nice moment all around. She does finally open the door, and we cut ahead a year or so, and apparently she has been killed. Now that's a great start and opening, but the movie just kind of goes downhill for me the rest of the way. Now that we were in the present, the husband Ted visits Danny's twin sister Darcy, who runs a kind of curio shop that sells cursed or magical items of sorts. She's blind, and she also has a psychic gift. And the choice was to give her this very subdued, kind of bland performance, which we just saw the same actor in the cold open as Danny, who was great. So I have to believe that this was a directorial choice to go in this direction. And this is also the first place where I really started to dislike the look of this film. I mean, to be frank, I hated the look of this film. Now, I understand that this movie's low budget. I tried to get a fix on exactly how much this movie cost to make, and I first heard under $10 million. But there is a huge difference between like a $100,000 movie and a $9 million movie. I did find some discussion where the numbers seem to fall around the $1 million mark. Now, that's definitely low. But if it's true, it's not so low that it can be excused for how this movie looked. Now, I get that some people don't care about this element, are more forgiving. However, that is one of the things that will always bother me. And it's not that they couldn't afford better equipment or lighting, it's more of the scheme that they incorporated with that equipment. Now, as a cinematographer, I know a lot about equipment and lighting, and it's no longer the days of needing these gigantic 5K hot lights in order to light a set properly. The way modern equipment is now, I mean, you could basically light a scene with practical light bulbs and some diffusion, and most cameras will still create a great image. Yes, expensive lights are better than cheap lights, but long gone are the days of needing to really overlight a scene. This movie chose the 80s BBC masterpiece theater lighting design, where they take a bright light and then position it behind the actor just above frame. To me, that just gives us such a set type look and feel. Horror movies, in my opinion, need to make as much as possible seem as though everything is as real as it can be. The more real it looks, the more the audience will get sucked into the world and feel the journey and suspense. If a shot looks like it's on a set, even if you don't pick it out consciously, I think subconsciously your brain knows it's not real, and it lessens the impact. Like I said, I understand most people probably don't care about this stuff like that, but it is a pet peeve of mine, and I just can't ignore it. It just felt, in general, kind of cheap to me, and I don't think that had anything to do with the type of equipment that's used. Now, sticking to the look and feel of this film, there was also just some weird choices on the setting and production design. Like, the house that Ted and Danny bought, for instance, either was a giant barn or a former monastery, and they just decide to turn one tiny piece of it into a house. I know I should get past this, but I just found that to be so terrible looking. Like, who would want to live there? It literally looks like someone just put a couch and some bookshelves in a barn. Okay, I understand they probably got that location for very cheap, and the idea of this old structure in the middle of nowhere seems like a good idea, but it just felt so out there that it took me out of the movie completely. Anyway, enough of the looks thing. Let's get back to the story. So Ted is now with a new girlfriend, Yana, living in this finished house/barn that Danny died in. Apparently, Danny's murder is pinned on the guy at the door that night, and while that guy is incarcerated at a mental hospital, he ends up getting killed by a mystical creature. Now, Darcy gets her hands on that killer's fake eye and is able to use her psychic gift to see if he really did kill her sister. She does believe the answer is no and shows up at Ted's house unannounced in order to investigate one evening. This is where the bulk of the story is told. Darcy and Yana staying in this house while Ted goes off to work and Darcy looks for answers. But the problem that I have with this movie is she never really looks for answers. She kind of just sits there and the answers just kind of come to her while Yana continues to wander around the house wondering what the fuck is going on. So one of the things that happens is before Darcy's arrival, she had delivered this giant man-sized wooden puppet as a gift to Ted. I'm sure you've seen it in the promotional content. It's everywhere whenever they talk about this movie. Now, this thing just kind of sits there and looks creepy, but that's the only real trick it has. Sit there and look creepy and try and guess if it moved or not. It's such an ugly, on-the-nose type of item. Like, remember when the original Child's Play came out? That was a terrifying movie. And why? Partially because the doll looked so normal. It looked harmless, but it wasn't. But introducing this item that is so clearly trying so hard to be scary, that it ends up having the opposite effect. This puppet just kind of sits around and looms in the background for most of the movie until finally it's used in what I would consider the most boring way possible. Now, this isn't a bad idea, but as with the rest of the movie, nothing's really done with it to earn anything substantial. Now, as Yana is wondering what the fuck is up with Ted's former sister-in-law, this is also where the script shows its ugly hand again, where the interactions between everyone I found either extremely clunky or very stale. Now, it didn't help, I also found the acting to be very flat, but this dialogue wasn't doing them any favors either. I mean, there is a lot of empty space here. At one point, there is what seemed like a 2-minute sequence where Yana is just looking for her house keys. She can't find it at the door, so then she checks the bedroom, and then checks the kitchen. Like, that in and of itself would be fine if there was something hiding in the house that was looking to get her. And the tension is seeing if it will jump out at her as she goes from room to room. But there's no tension. She's just looking for her keys. The whole sequence could have gone from her not finding him at the door to end scene, and nothing would have been lost. And that felt like a microcosm of the whole movie to me. Lots of shifting around the board without a lot of forward progress. Okay, I understand reviews are really just personal tastes, and to be fair, the elements were in this movie to be great. Murder, mental hospitals, betrayal, evil puppets, dark magic, spirits, crazy people, houses in the middle of the woods on lonely dark nights, and I will say the story ends in a satisfying way. But I just felt it didn't spend enough time on things that it should have, and spent way too much time on dead ends, giving an overall lackluster pacing, where even the end couldn't really save it for me. I'd give this movie a C-, but let me know what you think.